faithfully delivering value and interpreting global bestsellers. Hello, this is Sally Book Talk. Today I'm interpreting the book The Man Who Couldn't Stop. This is a popular science book about OCD. OCD is a common mental illness. Constantly washing hands, repeatedly checking if lights are off. These could all be symptoms of OCD. OCD ranks fourth among the most common mental disorders just after anxiety disorders. Psychiatrists believe the incidence of OCD is about 2% to 3%. Based on this ratio, over 30 million people in China suffer from OCD. OCD causes a lot of suffering for patients. The World Health Organization has ranked OCD as the 10th leading cause of disability, believing its negative impact on life exceeds that of diabetes. In Ethiopia, a girl named Bella, due to OCD, gnawed away a wall in her home. Over 7 years, she consumed over half a ton of earth bricks, resulting in her body being full of parasites, swollen intestines, and unbearable pain. Even so, Bella was diagnosed with only moderate OCD. Many severe patients suffer even more. The author of this book, David Adam, is a writer and editor for Nature magazine and an accomplished science writer, having been named Writer of the Year by the UK Science Writers Association.
More importantly, David is also an OCD sufferer. Specifically, he's terrified of getting AIDS, always feeling life is full of HIV. He constantly wipes cups and bottles.
If his skin gets scraped and bleeds, he worries if it was caused by a nail infected with HIV. David knows these thoughts are baseless, but he just can't control himself. After being tormented by OCD for over a decade, he finally sought medical help and learned more about the disorder. He combined his experiences seeking treatment to write this popular science book on OCD. The book not only covers OCD's causes and symptoms, but also traces scientists' evolving understanding and various treatment explorations. After publication, it topped the UK Sunday Times bestseller list and was hailed by The Guardian as a stunning and astonishing work. Next, I'll break down the book's main content into 3 parts. First, what is OCD? Second, what triggers OCD? Third, how to treat OCD. So first part, what is OCD? OCD's formal medical explanation is obsessive-compulsive disorder, triggered by intrusive thoughts leading to persistent repetition in thinking and behavior. Patients know their thoughts and behaviors are irrational and unnecessary, but they can't control themselves, suffering deeply. What are intrusive thoughts? Everyone experiences various thoughts in daily life. Many are sudden, uncontrollable mental distractions. For example, while riding the subway after work, a song suddenly pops into my head, or I zone out at work and replay recent novel plots. Some thoughts violate our self-perception, lacking motive or logic, causing distress and shock. Psychologists call these intrusive thoughts, which can develop into OCD. For instance, a loving mother suddenly wanting to choke her child when seeing them, or someone feeling an urge to jump from height without reason. These conflict with our self-identity. Oh, we feel we shouldn't have such thoughts, suffering pain and fear, worrying about mental instability. A key trait of intrusive thoughts is their contradiction with self-perception. Consider Xiaolong. After his mother's death, he's deeply sad, unable to focus at work, constantly missing her. This is also an uncontrolled thought causing pain, but it aligns with his self-perception. Xiaolong feels this thinking is normal, so it's not intrusive. Intrusive thoughts often involve self-harm, harming others, or irrational fears, making people rarely discuss them. But psychologists reveal intrusive thoughts are surprisingly common. 90% of people admit to having them. Most drivers have imagined veering off-road. 40% have felt impulses to jump from heights. Many have feared contracting STDs. Though distressing, most treat these as passing distractions without fixation. Over time, these thoughts fade on their own.
But some can't ignore them. They become terribly anxious, thinking, these thoughts are horrifying. I must control myself.
Not thinking this way, so they use repetitive compulsive behaviors to suppress thoughts and ease anxiety. For instance, the author constantly wipes cups and bottles, telling himself, I've cleaned the house spotless, no HIV virus here. A girl had an intrusive thought about bugs entering her body.
So she didn't speak a word for 10 whole months to avoid bugs flying into her mouth.
Other compulsive behaviors are hidden, mental acts that outsiders can't observe. For example, when dining with others, the author obsessively watches each person's cup to prevent mixing, but this suppression backfires, intensifying the intrusive thoughts. This is known as the white bear effect in psychology. The name comes from a famous experiment. Psychologists had two student groups. Group A was told not to think of a white bear. Group B was encouraged to think about the bear more. Each thought was recorded by pressing a bell. Unsurprisingly, on average, Group B thought of the bear more frequently. Then the psychologists swapped the group's tasks. Group A, previously avoiding the bear, now focused on it. Group B, previously encouraged, now avoided it. Group B, who had been thinking of the bear, now avoided it. Results showed Group A's thoughts surged past Group B's initial count.
Why did this happen?
Psychologists think the brain's suppression process has two parts. First, diverting attention, actively done. To avoid the bear, students might ponder yesterday's meal or future plans. Second, the brain automatically checks if we're thinking of the bear. Uncontrollable. But these processes conflict. First, the check itself reminds the brain of the bear, deepening the impression. Second, diverting attention drains energy and can't last forever. But the check is unconscious and automatic. It persists relentlessly. So when students stop diverting attention, the brain still checks. Whether they're thinking of the white bear, making Group A more likely to think of it. Fatigued realization. Suppressing intrusive thoughts works the same way. We can't control ourselves 24/7. Exhaustion sets in. Thus, the more people suppress intrusive thoughts, the more they resurface during lapses, evolving into persistent obsessions and a self-reinforcing cycle. The more obsessive thoughts occur, the more anxious people become, and the more frequent compulsive behaviors grow, further activating obsessions. Finally, when someone spends hours daily on obsessive thoughts and compulsions, they become an OCD patient. As obsessions and compulsions worsen, patients develop other abnormalities. The author highlights two. First, risk magnification. OCD patients constantly fear disasters. Their anxiety exaggerates risks if probability isn't zero. They believe they'll encounter it. A doctor told the author kissing transmits HIV at 1 in a million odds. Ordinary people would consider kissing safe and non-transmissive. But to the author, since risk isn't zero, he could contract HIV through kissing. This heightened his worry. OCD's second manifestation is distrusting memory. Many OCD patients repeatedly check, like whether lights are off or cups cleaned. Initially done to ease anxiety, excessive repetition makes patients doubt memory reliability. For example, confirming if lights were off worsens compulsions. Why does repeated checking erode memory confidence? Psychologists note our brains ignore familiar details during repeated scene recall, focusing instead on novelty. Obvious things like kitchen lights are confirmed initially, but ignored later. We know what, thus after multiple checks, originally clear details blur, breeding self-doubt. OCD's anxiety and repetition traits appear in other mental disorders too. So in daily life, people easily confuse OCD with anxiety disorders, phobias, and obsessive-compulsive personality disorder, but they're distinct. First, OCD versus anxiety disorders. Anxiety disorders target clear real-world risks, while OCD's anxieties are often imaginary risks. Take Xiao Wang. Poor grades make him fear failing graduation defense, a tangible issue. If severe, this could develop into an anxiety disorder. But if Xiao Wang inexplicably fears car crashes, finding it absurd yet uncontrollable, that might be OCD. Next, OCD versus phobias. Both may fear the same thing. The difference? Phobia sufferers avoid external triggers, while OCD fears stem from internal thoughts that can't be escaped. For example, as an arachnophobe, avoiding spiders means no impact. I don't dwell on it.
But with OCD, I constantly fear spiders crawling into my mouth, cleaning obsessively even without seeing any, suspecting hidden threats.
Finally, OCD versus Obsessive-Compulsive Personality Disorder, OCPD. OCPD means extreme orderliness and detail fixation. Unlike OCD, OCPD patients see their behavior as egocentric, problem-free, like an extreme neat freak proudly wiping everything 10 times. That might be OCPD. OCD patients may clean repeatedly too, but know it's unnecessary. Additionally, OCD cleaning often fixates on specific zones. He might scrub the toilet 10 times daily, yet ignore months-old kitchen leftovers. While OCPD patients have no such limits, they clean everything visible. All right, we've seen how intrusive thoughts violating self-perception cause extreme anxiety, leading to suppression attempts that evolve into OCD. Oh, scientists haven't found a definitive answer about how intrusive thoughts originate. In medieval times, people believed intrusive thoughts were demonic possession, signs of tainted souls. Others thought people with such thoughts were insane or perverted. Psychoanalyst Freud believed childhood repression of sexual or excretory instincts caused them. But modern psychology shows most people have intrusive thoughts with varied content. Certain factors make some more prone to intrusive thoughts or anxious about them, developing into OCD. Now, part 2, factors that easily trigger OCD. We'll cover 4 main factors. First, belief distortion, unrealistic thinking patterns affecting objective perception. The author describes 3 types. First, thought-action fusion. People with this overinflate thought importance. They equate thinking with actual action. Having an intrusive thought makes them feel guilty, causing anxiety. For example, passing a bank and suddenly thinking, should I rob it? Most would dismiss it, but I believe thinking it means I'll do it. So I'm a morally corrupt criminal. This anxiety drives compulsive suppression. Second, belief distortion, perfectionism, demanding flawlessness, tolerating 0 errors. Such people get more anxious about intrusive thoughts. Back to the bank example. As a perfectionist, I might not feel criminal but find these thoughts too bizarre. I must stop them. Pursuing certainty through compulsions. Third, belief distortion, inflated responsibility. These people believe any tangential connection makes them fully responsible for outcomes. Psychologists find stronger responsibility correlates with more intrusive thoughts about disasters. For example, as a driver, believing I'd bear 100% responsibility for any accident. Then, while driving, I'm more prone to intrusive thoughts. One moment fearing I'll swerve off road, the next worrying I'll run a red light. After having thoughts about killing someone, I grow more anxious, terrified I might actually do it, leading to compulsive behaviors, like constantly checking mirrors, driving extremely slow. Some OCD patients even collect street glass shards, fearing someone might get cut. Believing not preventing it equals intentionally harming them. Where do these unrealistic beliefs come from? Psychologists believe childhood experiences are key sources of belief distortion. If parents give older children excessive authority over siblings, they may develop inflated responsibility as adults. Other studies found OCD patients' parents often demand excellence, expecting top academic rankings. Under such pressure, children chase perfectionism, setting stricter standards, causing belief distortion. Triggers for OCD. The second factor, traumatic events. Psychologists found over half of OCD patients pinpoint a distressing event before symptom onset. A child named Howard witnessed a car accident at 5. A pedestrian hit unconscious, covered in blood. Howard trembled uncontrollably on the spot. Days later, he began washing hands obsessively, sometimes scrubbing most of the night till skin cracked and bled. He also pestered constantly, asking parents and teachers if his hands were clean. Howard said he washed not from germ fear, but a bizarre sensation. Only washing stopped the thoughts. Classic OCD. Beyond psychological trauma, physical injuries can trigger OCD too. An American with a skull fracture from a crash awoke with intense, intrusive thoughts, constantly fearing HIV and cancer. Others post-epilepsy surgery began repeatedly checking items and counting objects. As for why trauma causes intrusive thoughts, and why OCD manifestations vary so widely remains a mystery. Oh, scientists need to keep researching to find answers. The third factor triggering OCD is issues with the basal ganglia. This ancient brain structure deep within the cerebrum exists in many species. Scientists believe the basal ganglia stores repetitive and automated behavioral programs, enabling quick reactions during emergencies without conscious thought. If this area malfunctions, these programs get erroneously triggered or fail to shut down, leading to OCD. MRI scans reveal abnormal activity near the basal ganglia when OCD symptoms manifest in many patients. Numerous patients develop OCD after basal ganglia damage. A Dutch man suffered cardiac arrest at 42, causing oxygen deprivation and dysfunction in his basal ganglia. He then developed compulsive whistling, up to 8 hours daily, becoming angry and anxious if prevented. Another French man experienced convulsions and coma after a wasp sting. Brain scans showed basal ganglia damage. Later, he developed OCD symptoms, constant mental counting and repetitive switching. The fourth OCD trigger is evolution. Some psychiatrists think OCD isn't just malfunction but an evolutionary product. One theory is group selection. This theory suggests behaviors benefiting groups get preserved. OCD traits like repetitive cleaning and checking may have aided primitive tribes. For example, OCD individuals in tribes might repeatedly wash food or drink only upstream water. Though unaware of germs, they objectively raised hygiene standards, reducing disease risks versus other tribes. With better survival and reproduction, these irrational behaviors were evolutionarily preserved. Another theory speculates OCD stems from innate disgust. Disgust evolved to steer us from potential harms.
Oh, like how we feel disgusted by feces and rats since they spread disease, or by bloody wounds reminding us of death threats.
So, some propose that people with stronger disgust reactions are more likely to develop compulsions to eliminate that feeling. Indeed, studies support this. In experiments, worse OCD symptoms correlated with stronger disgust toward toilet or wound images. However, the author reminds readers that evolutionary OCD research remains early stage. Most theories are still speculative. We should approach this with caution. All right, to summarize part 2, belief distortion, traumatic events, basal ganglia dysfunction, and evolution may all trigger OCD. So now part 3, how to treat OCD. In the misunderstood Middle Ages, OCD sufferers faced tragic fates, burned as demon-possessed or locked away as lunatics. Over time, people gradually recognized OCD as a mental illness. In the early 20th century, Freud pioneered psychoanalytic therapy for OCD. As mentioned, he believed OCD stemmed from repressed childhood desires, so he'd probe patients' upbringing, sexual history, and parental relationships to release the subconscious. But to date, no reliable evidence proves psychoanalysis effectively treats OCD. Many patients showed no improvement even after years of treatment. By the 1940s, some doctors treated OCD by removing brain parts, like the frontal lobe or via limbic leucotomy. The logic: since OCD symptoms rely on neural signaling, disrupting these circuits blocks transmission. Thus, neurosurgery doesn't fix the problem. It destroys brain tissue to prevent symptoms. Objectively speaking, this surgery did show effectiveness. Oh, in 1945, a UK hospital management committee survey showed 2/3 of OCD patients undergoing lobotomy experienced symptom relief, were eliminated. But a 2008 study found that among 25 OCD patients receiving neurosurgery, 9 improved, yet 22 suffered side effects, with 10 experiencing major cognitive impairment. Additionally, in the 1960s, aversion therapy gained popularity, linking compulsive behaviors with unpleasant stimuli.
A common form was electroshock therapy. Electrodes attached to a compulsive hand washer's fingers would trigger shocks upon water contact.
Yet evidence proved aversion therapy ineffective for OCD. Patients often fell back into the white bear effect. The more they avoided symptoms, the worse they became. These methods are now abandoned by the medical community. Today, two effective treatments prevail. First, medication, specifically SSRIs, a common antidepressant class. Doctors observed OCD symptoms significantly easing with these drugs. One OCD patient feared bacterial contamination, refusing to touch anything others used. After medication, he actually played tennis with others' rackets without compulsive hand washing afterward. SSRIs are now widely used for OCD. They boost serotonin levels, which transmits neural signals. Why increased serotonin alleviates OCD remains incompletely understood. Research continues. Note, these drugs don't work for all. About 40% see no improvement. Side effects include reduced libido and concentration issues, plus withdrawal upon discontinuation.
After stopping medication, the author frequently woke startled from sleep, even weeping uncontrollably.
Additionally, he experienced phantom smells, like pungent wood smoke or sweet caramel. The second method is cognitive behavioral therapy, a form of psychotherapy.
Therapists address OCD from both cognitive and behavioral levels to shift patients' attitudes.
Cognitively, therapists explain OCD formation, helping patients understand suppressing intrusive thoughts actually fuels the disorder. They also identify patients' belief distortions, teaching them to recognize and refute irrational beliefs. A crucial aspect of CBT is showing patients that skipping compulsions won't cause disasters. The anxiety subsides naturally, breaking the obsessive-compulsive cycle. Behaviorally, therapists expose patients to anxiety triggers, helping them adapt without compulsions.
For example, a middle-aged woman with animal obsession was asked to let a hamster burrow in her bed.
Another civil servant fearing envelope contamination washed hands obsessively. His therapist had him lie in piles of envelopes. Through exposure therapy, patients realize their fears are irrational. Anxiety doesn't materialize, so they gradually reduce symptoms. Numerous studies find CBT effectively reduces anxiety in OCD patients. The author also recommends OCD patients try this therapy. That CBT isn't universally effective. It requires patient commitment. Some quit exposure therapy as too hard. Others distrust analysis and reject self-reflection, causing treatment failure. All right, that covers the book's main content. Finally, two important reminders. First, repetitive behaviors like hand washing or checking doors or lights don't automatically mean OCD. OCD diagnosis involves behavioral patterns, frequency, and other factors. Always seek professional diagnosis and treatment. Second, neither medication nor CBT currently cures OCD. They alleviate symptoms, reduce episodes, and help faster recovery during flare-ups.
For most patients, OCD sticks with them for life. What they can do is reduce its disruption to their lives.
The author of this book is now in such a state, though OCD occasionally surfaces, it doesn't linger long and rarely causes him pain. Oh, the man who couldn't stop. That's all for this book's interpretation. Reading notes are below the audio. See you next time.